Hey everyone, welcome back to Chess on Ice. Now, I think most of you have probably heard of a program called ChatGPT. It's an AI program that was basically trained on most of the internet and works as a chatbot that can basically talk to you about anything. It's been in the news a lot because high school and even some college students have used this to write papers on all sorts of things. And you can ask it about anything, get information back, usually pretty accurate. Not always super accurate though, and that's what we're going to be testing out today. If ChatGPT can help a Stanford student write a paper about quantum computing, don't you think it should be able to teach us a little something about curling strategy? Well, that's what we're here to find out today, and I'm going to work through the program and see what we can find out with the help of our new AI Skip. So let's see if they're ready to skip the briar, or if ChatGPT is more suited to maybe a beginner's night at your local club. Alright, we're going to start with something simple. Just tell me a little bit about curling. Well, it turns out ChatGPT does know a little bit about the sport. It says curling is a sport that is played on ice, where players slide stones across a sheet of ice towards a target area, called the house. The objective of the game is to score points by getting your team's stones closer to the center of the house than your opponent's stones. Curling is played with two teams, each consisting of 4 players. 1 player on each team, called the skip, is the team captain and is responsible for calling the shots and deciding on the strategy for each shot. The game is played over a series of ends, which are similar to innings in baseball. Each team consists of each player on both teams throwing 2 stones, and the team with the stone closest to the center of the house scoring points. The team with the most points at the end of the game wins. Curling requires a combination of physical skill, strategy, and mental focus. Players must have good balance, coordination, and strength to slide the heavy stones down the ice, while also being able to accurately judge the speed and direction of the stone. Curling is a popular sport in many countries, particularly in Canada, Scotland, and then the northern United States. There's also an Olympic sport with both men's and women's competitions. Not too bad. Probably give ChatGPT a A- on that. Doesn't mention mixed doubles at all. Strength, not necessarily a big deal when it comes to sliding the stones. We usually know what direction the stone is going in as well, but I'm sure that was supposed to be part of the curl. So anyway, all right, good start on the basics of curling, but let's see how ChatGPT does when we get into strategy. And we'll start simple. Let's ask it to give us 250 words on curling strategy. And here it comes. Curling strategy is a crucial element of the game. It can often be the deciding factor in which team comes out on top. I couldn't agree more. That is the premise of this channel. There are several key factors that come into play when devising a strategy, including position of the stones, direction of speed in the ice, and the skill level of the opposing team. Sure. One of the primary goals of curling strategy is to gain control of the house, which is the target area in the center of the ice. Sort of true. This is accomplished by positioning your team's stones in such a way that they block your opponent's stones from getting close to the center, while also maintaining a clear path for your own stones to make it to the center. Not entirely wrong, but that's situational, Another important aspect of curling strategy is knowing when to be aggressive and when to play it safe. Absolutely true. For example, if your team is trailing behind in points, you may choose to play more aggressively by attempting more difficult shots in order to gain an advantage. On the other hand, if you have a comfortable lead, you may choose to play it safe and focus on protecting your lead by blocking your opponent's shots. Oh, ChatGPT, here's your first big mistake. One thing here, you're not playing it safe when you're focusing on blocking shots with guards. That's definitely an aggressive way to play. And playing aggressively doesn't necessarily mean you're doing things that are more difficult. Although I would agree that you're probably going to play more difficult shots when you're behind. If you're ahead, you'll play simpler shots that are easier just because you're ahead and you don't need to take chances. Let's see. The speed and direction of the ice also play a critical role in curling strategy. Players must constantly adjust their shots based on the changing conditions of the ice, which can be affected by factors such as temperature, humidity, and the amount of use the ice has had. Okay, those are factors in how ice works. I wouldn't say the direction of the ice is something. They're probably talking about the amount of curl. Again, can't expect this AI bot to know all the lingo, although usually that's a strong point of it. As we go on, finally, curling strategy requires strong communication and teamwork between players. Big point in ChatGPT's favor here. The AI knows what it's talking about. Communication critical, and I think that's often overlooked by people when they play, at least in terms of how important that is to getting successful results. The skip is responsible for calling the shots and making decisions based on the position of the stones, but it's up to the other players to execute those shots with precision and accuracy. Very true. Overall, curling strategy is a complex and nuanced aspect of the game that requires a combination of skill, experience, and strategic thinking. Strategy requires strategic thinking. Who knew? With the right strategy in place, a team can gain a significant advantage over their opponents and increase their chances of winning. So, concluding sentence, not bad. Overall, maybe more of a B-. There were a couple mistakes in there. But as a general overview, sure, okay. But I think what we're going to learn about whether this AI skip has what it takes to compete in the big leagues is when we get into more specific questions. Me some advice on curling strategy without the hammer. Okay, playing without hammer and curling can be a challenging position as your team does not have the last stone advantage in each end. That is true. However, there are several strategies that can help your team overcome this disadvantage and still come out on top. One strategy is to focus on controlling the front of the house, which is the area closest to the center of the ice. Well, the front of the house isn't closest to the center of the ice, but I think what it's trying to say here maybe is that you want to control the center front of the house and the area right in front of the house. But we'll move on. By placing your stones strategically in this area, you can make it more difficult for your opponent to get their stones close to the center, which can help prevent them from scoring points. Sort of true. Another strategy is to play a more defensive game by placing your stones in such a way that they act as guards, blocking your opponent's stones from getting close to the center. Again, not really defensive, that's kind of aggressive. This can help create a more cluttered house, which can make it more difficult for your opponents to score points. I have to disagree with you there a little bit, ChatGPT. I think what you're really doing there by making a more cluttered house without hammer is making it more likely that you will score a point, not really making it more difficult for your opponent to score many points. Because you're playing aggressively, you're focused more on scoring it all and worrying less about what your opponent is doing. You can also try to force your opponent into making difficult shots by placing your stones in such a way that they create difficult angles or make it more difficult for your opponent to execute their shots with precision. This can put pressure on your opponent and increase the likelihood of them making mistakes. Okay, this is not terrible general advice. I think that's something you'd want to do when you're in trouble generally, either because you're playing a better team or you're behind on the scoreboard. You know, mix the game up a little bit, make it a little more complicated, make it where either side might make mistakes, and if they make the bigger mistakes or at the critical times, you can jump on those opportunities. And ChatGPT ends up going over its kind of rote paragraph about communication and teamwork being key. Although it says it's key when playing without the hammer, it's just always key. Each player should be aware of the overall strategy and work together to execute the shots with precision and accuracy. Also true, you do want to make sure your team's on board and knows what the strategy is. If people get confused about what you want on a given shot, that's bad enough. And sometimes knowing the overall strategy pretty well will help sweepers even, and certainly your vice and of course the skip, make those sort of split-second decisions about what to do on plan B. What do we want when we can't get the shot exactly right? By working together as a team and focusing on controlling the front of the house, you can still be successful in curling even without the last stone advantage. Okay. C plus maybe. I mean, some of that advice is useful, some is kind of very generic. It didn't really talk about how to steal, and maybe that's a question we should ask. What strategy should I use to steal points in curling? Funnily enough, and this might become an ongoing pattern, I'm afraid, ChatGPT gave kind of the same exact advice for stealing points as it did with playing without the hammer, which are not, of course, the same things. You don't always want to steal. Shouldn't say that. It's always great if you steal. There's almost never a time where you're unhappy about stealing, but not always the primary strategy when you don't have the hammer. Often you're okay with giving up a force of 1. Well, it says that this can be a challenging strategy to execute, but there are several key tactics that can help your team successfully steal points. One strategy for stealing points is to focus on controlling the front of the house. Again, kind of the same thing. Force your opponents to make more difficult shots. force your opponents to make mistakes. I mean, very generic advice and very similar. This is a D. I mean, maybe if I hadn't seen the previous ones, I'd upgrade this to a C. But, you know, ChatGPT, you got to be a little more specific. We're talking about stealing as opposed to just playing without hammer. I'm looking for tips about putting up a center guard or, you know, trying to get something on the forefoot guarded or anything else, you know, leaving my opponent with a tough last shot, that sort of thing. So what should we do next? Let's see, we'll get more specific. Let's say, what should I do if I have hammer and I am losing by 2 points in the last end? So this is an interesting, this one is actually different than the stuff for stealing. Although there's still a few overlaps, but at least it recognizes that strategy with the hammer is a little different. So here we go. If you have the hammer in the last end of a curling game and you're losing by 2 points, it can be a challenging position to be in. Not wrong, ChatGPT. However, there are several strategies you can use to increase your chances of coming back and winning the game. First, it's important to communicate with your team and agree on a game plan. Absolutely agreed. Great time for a team meeting before the end. A situation where you're in a little trouble but still in the game. You may need to take some risks and attempt more difficult shots in order to score 2 points and tie the game. I'd also say you're probably looking to score 3 and win. If you tie the game, you're going to an extra end. But of course, if you're in a league where you can have ties, then sure, 2 points might be the primary goal, with 3 points being sort of the bonus if you can get it. However, it's also important to be mindful of the risks involved and make sure you're not putting yourself in a worse position by attempting a difficult shot that could result in your opponent stealing points. Ooh, first huge miss here by the AI skip. You don't care if the opponent steals points when you're in the final end and you're losing. You only care about how much you're scoring. If you score 1 point, that's exactly as good as your opponent stealing 8. One strategy you can use to focus on placing your stones in the house, which is the target area in the center of the ice. By placing your stones in strategic positions, you can create opportunities to score points and potentially tie the game. Second sentence is fine, although it's extraordinarily generic, doesn't say what those strategic positions are. But I have to say, placing your stones in the house, not the best strategy when you're trailing by 2 in the last end. Your opponents are just going to hit them. You're going to need some guards first. Another strategy is to try to force your opponent into making a mistake. This can be done by placing your stones in strategic positions that make difficult angles or make it more difficult for your opponent to execute their shots with precision. Of course, always a good idea. By putting pressure on your opponent, you increase the likelihood of them making a mistake. Absolutely. Opens up opportunities for your team to score points. Sure. And you want to stay focused, maintain a positive attitude, even if you're behind by 2 points. 100% true, though. That is actually great advice. You must stay focused. You must keep a positive attitude. It's too easy to get down on yourself or your teammates, or as a team sort of have morale drop when you are still in a position to win the game. Unfortunately, one big mistake there, putting rocks in the house. Another one, putting, you know, you don't want to risk giving up a steal. Those are just dead wrong. So I am going to have to give this one, D-. Barely avoiding a failing grade, only because I do like that it wants you to keep a positive attitude. And maybe we should ask about specific shots. Why should I throw a center guard? Good question. Of course, the answer is that you throw center guard when you don't have hammer and you want to protect the scoring area, shrink the scoring area, protect the forefoot, the area right near the button, so that you have a better chance of stealing and a better chance of limiting the hammer team from scoring points. First, a center guard can help your team gain control of the front of the house, which is the area closest to the center of the ice. This is something that's gotten wrong a couple times, but I'll give ChatGPT credit that that is true. The center guard can help you control the center front of the house. Great. By placing a center guard, you create an obstacle that makes it more difficult for your opponents to get their stones close to the center. This can force your opponent to take more difficult shots, which increases the likelihood of them making mistakes and opens up opportunities for your team to score points. A center guard can be used to protect your team stones that are already in the house, sure. If you already have stones in the house, throwing a center guard can help prevent your opponent from removing them with their next shot, sure. It can help your team maintain control of the house, increase the likelihood of scoring points. You know, all kind of true. Third, a center guard can be used as a setup shot for future ends. Wait, a setup shot for future ends? What? I knew I mean, I think our AI skip is a little confused here. You really can't use setup shots for future ends. You can set up for later in the end. I mean, that's what they mean. If you place a center guard successfully, they can create opportunities for your team to score points in future ends. Yeah. Okay. For example, if your opponent removes your center guard, you can place another guard to protect your stones and continue to apply pressure to your opponent. That part is correct. It has nothing to do with the first two sentences, which are complete nonsense. But yeah, when you put a center guard up, one thing is it makes the opponent sometimes have to remove it. And when they do that, you can put it back, hopefully force them to remove it again, and, kind of wind down the clock in and end that way by sort of making several rocks worth of time where the status quo will probably be maintained. Finally, a center guard can be used as a defensive strategy. That's not true. Center guards are pretty aggressive in most cases, at best neutral. Definitely not defensive, except maybe on like your last shot if you're just gonna, protect what you have and not try to score more. If your opponent has the last stone advantage, throwing a center guard can help prevent them from getting their stones close to the center and scoring points. Sort of. I do like that it mentioned the opponent having last stone advantage, which, implies you don't have it, which is when you throw a center guard 99% of the time. This can force your opponent to take more difficult shots, potentially make mistakes, open up opportunities for your team to steal points. Sure. Not sure how I feel about all that. There were some big mistakes in there, and some real confusion about setting up shots for future ends by throwing a center guard now. So I'm going to have to give you an F there. Finally, before we go, let's ask ChatGPT what it thinks about a couple of recent rule changes in curling and how they impact strategy. So, how does the 5-rock rule impact curling strategy? All right, pretty good answer here. The 5-rock rule, implemented in 2018, has had a significant impact in curling strategy. Under the 5-rock rule, teams are allowed to position up to 5 stones in the free guard zone before they are allowed to remove any of their opponent's stones from play. This has created more opportunities for offensive play and increased the importance of rock placement and timing in curling strategy. Other than the last few words there, dead on, I don't know how much it's increased the importance of rock placement and timing. Not sure timing, has changed because of the 5-rock rule, but absolutely has added more offensive play, absolutely has a pretty decent explanation of what that rule means. Teams are allowed to position up to 5 stones. Could be a little confusing because if someone read that and didn't know much about curling, they might think it's 5 stones for each team. It's not. It's 5 stones, the first 5 stones of the end total. But other than that, pretty good start. One of the main impacts of the 5-rock rule is that it has made it more difficult for teams to defend a lead. Absolutely correct. In the past, teams could remove their opponent's stones early in the end and focus on protecting their own stones in the house. However, under the 5-rock rule, teams are required to leave some of their opponent's stones in play, which creates more opportunities for offensive play, makes it more challenging to protect the lead. Pretty much all true. Under the 4-rock rule, you had to leave some rocks in play too. 5-rock rule has built on what the 4-rock rule created in the first place, what the free guard zone created in the first place. Some of what it says there probably applies more to the implementation of the free guard zone, and the 5-rock rule could be looked at as having built on that by giving even more opportunity for teams to play offense. The 5-rock rule has also increased the importance of rock placement and timing in curling strategy. Teams need to be strategic about where they place their stones in the free guard zone, as this can impact their ability to score points later in the end. In addition, teams need to be aware of the timing of their shots and adjust their strategy accordingly. With more stones in play, there are more opportunities for rocks to be moved around and for the situation on the ice to change quickly. Yeah, not a bad paragraph. Again, the timing stuff, I'm not quite sure. Overall, the 5-rock rule has had significant impact on curling strategy, particularly in terms of offensive play and rock placement. Teams need to be aware of the changes in the game and adjust their strategies accordingly to increase their chances of success. Not too bad. A couple weird things in there with the whole timing issue, but I'd give that a B. Good job, ChatGPT. Now, I'm going to ask about one other rule change, which will be the no tick rule. I'm curious how much ChatGPT knows about this. It doesn't know much about events from after 2021, and while this rule had already been starting to be implemented very slightly by 2021, really has taken up much more prominence in the last 2 seasons. So, okay. A mixed bag here for our AI skip. No tick rule, implemented in 2020, has had a significant impact on curling strategy, particularly in the early stages of an end. Really only in the early stages of an end. Although it does impact overall end strategy. Under the no-tick rule, teams are not allowed to hit their opponent's stones that are in the free guard zone with enough force to move them out of play. Incorrect. No-tick rule only applies to rocks that are resting on the center line. This has created more opportunities for offensive play and increased the importance of rock placement and timing and curling strategy. Definitely increased the importance of rock placement for the non-hammer team because, you got to get them right on the center line. In fact, the rest of this, as you can see, most of it here on the screen, is basically almost a cut and paste of the information that ChatGPT gave us with the 5 rock rule. The no-tick rule has also led to more emphasis on the accuracy of finesse of shots in the free guard zone. Absolutely true. As teams are no longer able to rely solely on hitting their opponent's stones with enough force to remove them from play. Well, during the free guard zone period, they couldn't do that anyway. It's only that they no longer can even tick them if they're on the center line. So this one's more like a D. There was some stuff in there that's accurate, but a lot of stuff that's not. That is our chat with AI chatbot ChatGPT about curling strategy and what an AI skip might do if it were on the ice. Overall, I don't think we have too much to worry about just yet. Seems like this is more of a club level skip with a very basic understanding of some curling strategy and strategic ideas than an expert tactician that's about to wipe you off the map the next time you play. So I would not advise checking with ChatGPT on your phone in the middle of the game for advice. Seems like it has some big holes in its knowledge, but I also wouldn't worry if you see your opponent doing that. So until next time, thanks for watching Chess on Ice, and a good curling to all my human followers out there.